Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend some time with Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. This book was originally published back in 1976, and I read a 2007 audio edition by MacMillan Audio. So, Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. So, I've been reading through this series. This is the third of the Dune series. I've previously chatted the first two in the series, so I will link to those chats down in the details below. So I want to be really careful in this video to not, in this chat, I don't want to talk about anything that I think would detract from reading this book for the first time reader. In series it's sometimes a little difficult. I thought what I would do is just to describe the book, I would actually just read the blurb that's available online. If you were to go to purchase the book, this is the information that you would see. So not to give away anything around the action that takes place in this book. We'll talk more about, though, some of the takeaways and main themes that I took away from the book. So we'll get to that here in a bit. But just what this book is about. The blurb says the children of Dune are twin siblings Leto and Ghanima Atreides, whose father, the Emperor Paul Muad'Dib, disappeared in the desert wastelands of Arrakis 9 years ago. Like their father, the twins possess supernormal abilities, making them valuable to their manipulative aunt Alia, who rules the Empire in the name of House Atreides. Facing treason and rebellion on two fronts, Alia's rule is not absolute. The displaced House Corrino is plotting to regain the throne, while the fanatical Fremen are being provoked into open revolt by the enigmatic figure known only as the Preacher. Alia believes that by obtaining the secrets of the twins' prophetic visions, she can maintain control over her dynasty. But Leto and Ghanima have their own plans for their visions and their destinies. So yeah, this book takes place 9 years after the action in Dune Messiah, the second book. So the twins are 9 years old, but they're like little adults because of they're preborn. They have sort of special skills because of their father and their long history, their father's long history, their grandmother's history with the Bene Gesserit. I've explained this sort of world in the previous videos, so I won't go into that too much here, but Alia in this book is ruling the Empire at this point as sort of like a regency. And so Leto and Ghanima are 9 years old, but they definitely do have some plans of their own for what they want to see occur. So yeah, I won't talk about the action beyond that too much, but just some key thoughts. One thing that continues to pop up in this book, it's mentioned, I don't know if it's mentioned so much, I don't know if it's mentioned at all actually in the previous two, but it's called abomination. And so it'll say, she is abomination, or he is risking abomination. So abomination is when a person's genetic memory, so in this far human future, especially the twins in this novel, but others they're called preborn. They have genetic memory, so you can remember. They can actually remember all their genetic history for thousands and thousands of years. So, like, you would be able to remember your great great grandfather's memories up to the point where you were conceived, or where your future great his like child was then conceived. So it's not spirit possession, it's more of a genetic possession that can occur because the genetic memories are very strong, and they can actually take over a person, and so they can actually be ruled by the memories of another person, of one of their ancestors. And this is what, in my interpretation of what abomination is, it's a form of possession, but it's not a spirit possession, it's a memory possession. And I thought this was really cool because learning to control these memories for these characters, especially the ones who have this really, really strongly, is a very difficult task. And learning how to ride that, if you had these memories echoing in your mind your whole life, it would be really hard to sift through that, because many people, in our own individual life, if we're not remembering a bunch of other lives, we're only remembering our current individual life. Already that sometimes gets overwhelming when we get burdened with the memories that we've collected in our current life. Now imagine you have your own memories plus those of thousands of others. It would be a very difficult thing to manage that consciously with your consciousness. And so this is discussed quite a bit. It's one of the main themes actually of this book. To me, it reminded me of the sandworms and riding the sandworms. There are these sandworms on Arrakis. There is this product called Spice, which the spice on Arrakis, I've talked about it in the previous chats. The spice can actually enhance this genetic memory, but the writing of the sandworms create the spice on Arrakis, and so to me this is just sort of a really complicated sort of metaphor in a way that these sandworms rise to the surface, and a person can actually ride that worm if they're skilled enough, but then the worm eventually has to be released and it sinks back down into the sand, which is basically, I think, sort of like a metaphor, like these memories, they rise to the surface. A person can use that memory, right, and ride it for a while, but you need to be able to let it go and let it sink into the sand, so without you on it, because otherwise, so that you can then move on and continue on with your life unharmed. If you stuck to that worm all the time, it would drag you down into sort of the sand of unconsciousness there, is the way that I'm taking and interpreting that. So I thought that was so cool. Then another kind of main theme that I took away from the book is fate, destiny, and control over the future. This is a theme that was continued, and it was started in the previous two books. It's in your first book, as well as very strong in the second book. Paul, in the first two books, Paul Atreides, he's able to see, so the spice melange gives people a sort of ability to see the future, some more than others. Paul can see multiple strands off into the future. And a lot of times people like to say, oh, I would love to be able to see in the future. Wouldn't it be nice if I could tell the future? And they want to figure out how to learn the skill of being able to see into the future. No way. This would not work. I mean, this is another thing, sort of like the memories. You would quickly become overwhelmed with the possibilities, because the future is not set, right? It's not a fixed thing. And so it depends on what we're doing, right? Our free will makes a decision, but until we make the decision, there's multiple, almost infinite numbers of strands of futures, and to navigate which would be the best one to take would be a very, very difficult task for a person to do. There's a quote around this that I thought was super cool, and I'll just read this quote real quick. It says, "But the universe would not turn backward. It was a great engine projected upon the gray void of non-existence. His knife, if it brought the death of the twins, would only reverberate against that void, weaving new complexities to echo through human history, creating new surges of chaos, inviting humankind to attempt other forms of order and disorder." So it's saying that there's that no matter what, the universe, you can't go backwards, you can't, it won't stand still. The universe is not going to stand still. It's a giant moving thing that you can't stop. And if you try to change the future, change the course of destiny by, in this case, killing the twins this person's contemplating, you think that would solve the problem, but actually it opens up a whole new realm of things that you probably haven't even considered. And so it just adds multiple other layers of variables and possibilities for the future. Some of them even maybe much worse than the twins or anyone or the action that you're trying to prevent, if that makes sense. Finally, the third kind of main theme is government, religions, hierarchies, and balance. So a theme of all three of these books so far has been about government and religion, and how governments can can get reformed with these outbursts of human creativity, and then religion's the same thing, this sort of outburst of energy, but then they quickly solidify and become rigid, and then they become even, they have to enforce their themselves then at that point through, really just raw power and coercion. And so, there needs to be a balance. I think is what the book's kind of one of the themes of the books. Messiahs are complicated things. The waiting for one is not quite the same thing as having one. So in the first two books, we talk about Messiah. The first book's called Dune. The second book is Dune Messiah. But, Messiah's waiting on a Messiah is quite a bit of quite different energy in a society or in a people or in a religion or in a government. Waiting for like a savior, as opposed to actually having one. That energy changes, and then the orbit, the gravity all becomes around the Messiah or around the government or around whatever you've created at that point. So I think that's real cool. There's a couple of quotes around this in the book. Wealth and abundance were gained, but the divine were lost. I jotted that down. This is, the planet Arrakis that this third one that all the books take place on starts out a really deprived planet, but then becomes very wealthy by book 3, and yet, the divine lost in a case of, there's a real connection, I think, sometimes to the spiritual, but then when you have it, like when you have your Messiah, then you're at risk of losing that connection with the divine, I think. And then another quote was, "An army is composed of disposable, completely replaceable parts." And so are societies, right? But, that quote, "An army is composed of disposable, completely replaceable parts." We all are, we're all disposable, replaceable we might not be to our immediate families, but to society in general, we are replaceable. That's how it's all structured, right? We're going to die off and other people are going to replace us. That's sort of that's life, right? So I thought that was real cool. And then finally, before I run out of time, just some other real cool stuff. A couple of things that popped up in the book is that this concept of money as a transfer of energy. I never thought about money that way, as a transfer of energy, but it is, right? Like it takes me energy to get the money, and then as I give it to someone else, money's an energy. It causes things to happen. It's an energy. It causes movement. I thought that was cool. There's also a reference to the pilgrimage of Canterbury in this book, which I thought was really, really fun. The Canterbury Tales. These humans were thousands and thousands of years away from our time now. And so this Canterbury and the Canterbury Tales, this reference to it, it's in the dim past. It's almost like a myth. But because of genetic memory, one of the characters actually remembers taking the pilgrimage to Canterbury. So I thought that was cool. Then finally, final quote, "Life requires dispute. You've been made to know by me that your reality differs from all others, that you're alive." That's by Leto II. I love that. Life requires dispute because life is a constant churn of change, right? So dispute. You've been made to know by me that your reality differs from all others. Your reality is different than mine. Your reality is unique. It's never existed before in the existence of humankind, and it will never exist again after you. So think about that and seize the day. Have a good one. I will leave the chat with that. I will have the next book in the series coming up fairly soon. Let me just pull that up, but it will not be my next chat. This is the next in the Dune series, God Emperor of Dune. This will probably be early in the new year before I get that book completed, as well as the chat done. My next chat is going to be That Wondrous Pattern, Essays on Poetry and Poets by Kathleen Raine. I should have a chat on this coming up fairly soon. So until next time, take care.